So I think that the interesting thing to hear about two different organizations and some of the decision paths they went through are some of the similarities. So both organizations started to think about culture. Who are we? What do we do? Do we have a policy about this? Do we have other constraints or compliance issues that we have to deal with? So they're all basic things, but believe it or not, they bite people because they don't think about them up front. You know, you started to think about, of course, costs and trade-offs and things like that. One thing I'm curious about, and I know, Mark, in your case, you talked about a strategy, a specific strategy for technology. Does that strategy vary at all by the intended use? So, for example, back-end plus internally facing versus customer-facing versus, quote, product technology, and you can think about that to see if your approaches are different in any of those things or if it's pretty consistent. And everybody, if you have questions, please step up. I'm just buying you time.
So yes, I think we always start with the plus mission, and the question is, how does this impact the researcher? And so, if it's something that we can invest our in-house technology resources on that has an impact on the researcher, then we're probably going to do that. Whereas if it is a back office kind of situation, it's not necessarily something that is researcher or user facing. It's something that is maybe an efficiency piece. We might go a different route.
So, to your original question, probably not for us. We don't. There's a certain level of remove being a traditional publisher between us and the reader and the customer. And our author and editor relations are heavily mediated and high touch. So that's not really a relevant divide. But one thing that I think is sort of built into our fabric is we don't often know exactly what we need until we try it and fail. And so I've been thinking about how can we try and fail with as little pain and cost as possible. And I'm not talking about this in terms of launching new products and MVP and Agile. I mean more like we know, say for instance, gosh, it's finally time that we need some sort of issue management system, but we don't know how we know what that is, but let's not go buy one right now. Let's go use a software as a service version. Let's use it as freeware. Let's do something that's cheap and easy and lets us understand the space more before we really invest in it.
Hi, Richard Wynn from Aries Systems. I'm one of the people here you want to throw tomatoes at because we're one of those terrible peer review system vendors.
More people liked their system, I'd just like to say that, than didn't.
Good.
So don't duck.
But I think it's a good idea to sort of balance the discussion a bit. So we have been a vendor to PLOS One since they got started with PLOS One on their growth. And really off the back of our system, they were able to grow, have virtually no downtime, have hundreds of features added, have comprehensive reporting, have UI improvements. And it's really thanks, and this could not just be Aries, it could be ScholarOne or EJP as well. It's thanks to the platforms that existed that PLOS One got to where it is today and actually has the free cash flow to actually try something new, which I actually welcome, and I think it's a great idea. And the more competition in the marketplace, the better. But I think it's also important to measure apples to apples and oranges to oranges. And some of the simplifications that you can make in a peer review interface often have a downside. So the Aperta system, for example, has no support for ORCID that I can see today. I'm sure it's coming, but as soon as you add that, you've added more complexity. It doesn't support LaTeX processing. So when you add that, it's not that PLOS can't add those things, but you're going to go down the same path as the rest of us have, is having to deal with adding that complexity. So it's not an easy problem to solve, and I think all the vendors here welcome productive and positive and feedback to actually improve the bar for everyone. It's not really a question. But
No, but actually, that's just to jump in for a second. It's an interesting point, though, and just before Mark jumps in there too, I think that, and this kind of gets back to something you said about trying. A lot of times you do try something with someone else, and then if you decide that that's a competitive advantage, that that's a place that you want flexibility, then you have a fork in your decision tree, and you have to decide which way to go. So.
Yeah, I don't dispute anything that Richard said, and in fact, I would completely endorse Aries Editorial Manager. It is a really excellent system. It's a mature system. It's well thought out. The workflow is good. There's no. It's not that it's a bad system and we're leaving it. We are positioning the situation as. It is not as flexible as we'd like it to be. It is not as easy or cheap as we'd like it to be when we want to make changes. And as I said, we're positioning ourselves for the long term by investing in a new house platform. And it is absolutely complex and hard to build the system. But we're pretty confident that we're going in the right way.
Okay. Are we turning this into an MTS debate?
This actually doesn't involve me. So.
I'm sorry. Well, as a customer, you're free to chip in. Would you share how much you've spent on a PERTA?
I'm sure people have looked up our 990 form and know that number.
Yes, they have.
More than I have. I actually don't know.
I mean...
Would you like to share that for us?
No, I'm sure it's in the millions of dollars, and there's only a few organizations that can spend that. And by the way, you've only just got started. I mean, you said it, 4 by 4 by 4. You haven't even hit scale yet, which is what you'll hit if you're going to deploy +1. And you have a whole range of different scaling problems at that level that you don't have at a journal that has a few submissions a day.
So, and also we're kind of getting into things that are specific to +1. When we're talking about how people choose technology and how they make these discriminations, all of those decision points that you talked about and that you're bringing up are both sides of what the trade-off that people have to make. They have to decide. And this isn't just happening in MTSs. When you look at scholarly hosting platforms and other platforms, people are starting to look and to say, what's the best choice for us? Do we want to build? Do we want to buy? Do we want a hybrid? Do we want to go somewhere in the middle where we're not necessarily buying a platform and we're not necessarily building from scratch, but we're going to partners that have modules and pieces that we can leverage in other places? And it's a decision-making process. And I'm sure you two can debate whether it was a good decision or not.
No, I do want to add, though, that if you are talking about build versus buy, you do have to be realistic about the costs. And I've never, ever seen a publisher or a scholarly society be realistic about the costs of development, because the costs are massive and they're not changing. There's new things that are happening, there's new standards coming out, new browser to support, and so you have to be realistic about that. And when it comes to changing software over time, just because you can change in-house, I often meet publishers who say getting a change done internally is a lot harder than going to a vendor, because I can apply commercial pressure on a vendor to make a change, whereas my own in-house team just tell me to,
Sure. And that's also that's a great point, though. It's a function of size, too. Some people in this room can exert pressure on a vendor, some can't. David, would you like to?
Yeah, so the answer to a bunch of those things, and I think it's one of the points you were making, is the agile process. So if you're not doing it, okay, get some books, watch some videos, start to get a real feel for that, okay? Because the iterative process solves most problems, and it solves them faster than any other way of doing it. And I think I'd just like to make that as a general point for anybody, whether you're building stuff yourself, which is a really good idea, or you're buying something from a vendor, which is also a really good idea. Get them to work agile and hold them to it, okay? It's a unifying principle, and it really works well.
Mm-hmm. Well, suddenly we are at time. No, really. But thank you all for coming and participating, and I'm sure Allison or Mark would be happy to answer any questions you have offline. Thanks.